want to talk you through with this little video about how to read a science textbook. Reading a science textbook is not like reading a novel, and it's not like reading maybe an assignment in an English class or a sociology class. The science textbook, the chemistry textbook, a physics textbook, a textbook that's heavy in mathematics is very, very different than reading other things. And I, as a chemistry major, never really wrapped my head around that early on. It took me a while to figure out my method for reading, but I wanted to give you an idea of some things that you can do as you read through a textbook. Now, the method we're going to talk about is called the SQ3R method. Now, I'm not going to judge that you use this method, but I do want to give you an idea that there's a very different way to read, and you're going to want to learn by reading. I'm not just going to assign reading so that you have something to do. I never do that. In every case, everything I assign is so you can learn by way of that item. So let's talk through this method. Before we do, I would like for you to read through those choices and select one. Now, there's no right answer. I just kind of want to look back and see, where do my students feel they are with regard to reading? Now, I would say that very few people choose D, that they don't want to hear a lecture. They would prefer to read a textbook in science or math. But there are people who do really enjoy that process and enjoy reading a textbook and would pick one up and read it. That's not a common situation. All right, so you know where you are with regard to this. When I was a student, was never told about how to read. We put a lot of energy in, when I was growing up, how to read fast. You couldn't read out loud, you couldn't move your lips, you couldn't follow along with your finger, because all those things slow you down. Well, when you're reading a textbook, you want to slow down. You want to give your brain time to process what you're hearing and what your eyes are seeing, okay? So it's not about speed, it's about comprehension. So one of my learning objectives when I sat down and thought about my course, what I wanted you all to be able to do was to be able to actually read technical information and gain understanding by the reading of that. It is not just about understanding chemistry. Understanding chemistry is great, and this is a chemistry course, and I want you to understand chemistry. However, if I send you out into the world, I want you to be a lifetime learner, and a lifetime learner is somebody who can take something, read it, and learn from it. So I have embedded within this course times that I said, okay, you read and be responsible for this. It'll show up on the test. So you got to make sure that you can do that. All right, so the method I'm talking about is SQ3R. The S stands for survey. We're going to talk about what that means. The Q is question. The first R is read. And then recite. And recite is not necessarily oral recitation, but we'll talk about that. And then review. So that's what these things stand for. Now, we're not going to do this together, though in class. When I had this as a lecture in class, we stopped and we worked through an article together in class. You might want to go ahead and get your article out and walk through this, starting and stopping the video, trying it as we go. I would recommend that. Or you can just watch this whole thing, take some notes, and then utilize this method for the article. Now, in this case, I have posted an article on the scientific approach to knowledge. It's a scientific method. Now, this is in your textbook, but I have gone ahead and posted it here so that you can do it now in case you're waiting for your textbook to arrive. Your textbook is essential for this class, so make sure you have it. But I have posted this article for you to look at and be able to utilize right away. So let's walk through them one at a time. Survey. You're going to look through that article. You're going to be looking at the title, the headings, the subheadings. What are those things that are bold-faced throughout there as headings and subheadings? If you read through that, you start getting a feeling for what you're going to be looking at. Don't read everything, read those items. The next thing you should go to is the captions. Look at the pictures, the images, the charts, those diagrams, and look at the captioning that they have put under each one. That's going to give you an idea of what we'll be studying and really focusing on as we go through and read that section. Something that you would never do in a novel is to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph, but for this section you ought to do that. You ought to read that first, that is introducing what's going on, that conclusion, this is what we learned, what we will talk about, what we learned, kind of get that parenthesis around the item that you're going to read. And you might want to, before you ever read that section, is go to the end of the chapter, and in the textbook they very often will have the key concepts of that chapter. You could read through the key concepts for that section, so you say, these are the key things that I'm going to be learning about in this section when I read it. So again, we're not talking about speed, getting it over with. We're talking about learning, and to learn you want to get your mind around the concepts that you will be learning about. The next thing you're going to do is, before you even start reading, is ask some questions. Okay, you're looking through, and you can do this while you're reading through those titles. Okay, you're asking yourself, okay, what is it I need to know? This sort of thing. How am I going to learn that? There's also questions at the end of the section that you're going to have presented to you, and you might want to look at those questions and let them do the questioning for you. But this is an interesting one here, one that I would recommend you do, is look at the learning outcomes list for the class. That's what LO stands for. Look at the learning outcomes and say, okay, which one of these learning outcomes is this chapter an obvious thing about? The learning outcomes will say, define such and such. Say, oh, well, yeah, I've got the definition in here. I can see that it's defined. Or be able to calculate, and we'll give you that. And you can say, oh, yeah, I'm calculating this. I can see in the example problem there's a calculation. So you're seeing that you'll be able to answer those questions about the learning outcomes by reading this section. Now you're ready to read, okay? So as you're reading, you're turning that brain on and not just reading words, but you are looking for the answers to those questions that you raised as you go through. Did I learn the definition? Okay. Am I seeing how to calculate this thing? You are looking for those things being answered as you read through it. Then there's going to be questions, maybe at the beginning and at the end of the chapter that the textbook actually has. You make sure you're answering those questions there. As you read, make sure you continue to reread the captioning. If they refer you to an image, make sure you read that look at that image and read the caption. There's going to be underlined, italicized, bold-faced words within those words and phrases. Those are always bold-faced, underlined, italicized, to draw your attention to them, because the author says these are the important things. Make sure you are really focusing on those things. Now, sometimes students will read through and say, as in figure 1.2, and they'll refer to a figure, and they just keep on reading. When it refers you to a figure, you look at that picture and you study, and then you go back to the words. They'll say, note how, as the pressure increases, the volume increases, okay? And you're noting that, and you look at the graph, and you say, oh yes, I see on this graph that when this one's going up, this one's going up. So you're studying those graphic aids because they've put them in there to assist you in learning about the material by studying those pictures. Reduce your speed. Stop. Reread. If you read and you zoned out, reread. That happens a lot for me. If you read and you don't understand it, you back up, you read it again. For me, when I read it and I don't understand it, it's very helpful for me to just do it out loud. I will read it out loud, and I can process it better when I'm hearing myself say it out loud. So that's the read part. The recite. Get it out of your mouth, okay? Get it out in the air. You've let your eyes do some work. You've seen the words, okay? You've turned that brain on. Now you're ready to involve other senses, and the reciting is getting other senses involved. Orally ask questions about your read, what you read. Orally summarize it. Say it out loud. Take notes, okay? So now you're getting kinetics involved. You're writing notes. Now you're doing this reciting and this taking notes while you're reading it. It doesn't like you read and then you do this. You can do all these things simultaneously, okay? Okay, so you are saying it out loud, you're writing down information, you're taking notes in your own words, and it is in green there because this is the part that you're going to turn into me. You're going to be taking notes over this section, and you're writing things out in your own words. It does absolutely no good to rewrite word for word a definition. It means you have no idea, or it indicates that you might not have any idea what those words mean. Put them in your own words, okay? State it in a way that makes sense to you. And if it is just a definition in a series of words that mean nothing to you, then you need to be asking more questions, okay? So the more senses you get involved, the more likely you're going to remember what you read, okay? You're working towards understanding it, and then remembering it is the next thing. So if you've said it out loud, you've said it, you've heard it, you're writing it down, you're using your hands, you've seen it with your eyes, all of those senses getting involved is going to help you remember so much better. And that's what the recitation part is, reciting it. So while you're reading, you're doing these things as well. So the R that a lot of people then throw out the window is the review. You need to revisit it. And I would say this is true for your lecture notes that you take as well as notes that you take on your reading. Every day you ought to go back and you've taken notes, you asked questions, you've answered questions, and then you next day go back after you've answered and written more questions down, you go back and review the ones that you did the day before and the day before that. If you'll do this every day, then when the test approaches and you're ready to take that test, it is not a matter of studying everything. You have refreshed your memory and refreshed your memory and refreshed your memory about it, and you have driven it into your long-term memory, and you will be able to do it for the test. I don't know how to train students into that. And very often they wait until much later in their life to figure that one out. But the more you will review the concepts on a regular basis, the less of a big deal it is to study when the test rolls around. So that is the method, the SQ3R method for reading that I wanted to give to you as an idea. Now you take that method or another method that you're familiar with and really enjoy, well, you know. A method that you like, I'll put it that way, and utilize it whenever I assign to you to read and take notes.